From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. We're privileged to have as our guest for this broadcast Kathleen Patten. Kathleen is the head of American Target Advertising. She's a graduate of the College of William and Mary in Virginia, where she received her Bachelor of Arts degree, and she received a graduate degree from George Mason University. She's had extensive experience in what is called direct mail, and at one point was a leader of an organization called the United Seniors Association. Kathleen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, how did you get into what is called direct mail?
Well, actually, I was very involved in college Republicans, actually in teenage Republicans in high school, then college Republicans.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Lake Braddock in Burke, Virginia, and my degree was in business administration, and I took a class on marketing in college at William & Mary, and I wrote my paper on the marketing of a political candidate. At that time, Richard Viguerie, who owns American Target Advertising, was the source for every article I researched, and so I wrote my paper on him and the marketing of a political candidate.
He was called the godfather of direct mail. Exactly.
And after college, I sent in my resume to American, or at the time, the Viguerie Company, and that was my first job out of college.
And when you arrived at the Viguerie Company, what was your principal responsibility?
I was an account assistant, so I basically did the legwork to get a mailing that had been written and designed out the door. So I dealt with the printers and the mail shops and the post office and all of that.
I noted on your resume that at one point you worked for Ann Stone.
Yes, I did.
Who at the time, I believe, was married to Roger Stone.
She was.
Yeah. What was it like working? She was another of those who trained under Richard Viguerie.
Yes, she did.
What was it like working for Ann?
Ann actually taught me a lot about running a business. She really did. She also, I wrote a tremendous amount of direct mail copy there. So she taught me the basics of writing direct mail letters. And we did a lot of campaign work there, so that was exciting, very different from direct mail for a nonprofit or direct mail for a political advocacy nonprofit. So it was a good experience.
How do you measure success?
I measure success by my clients' success. If my clients are happy and I'm meeting their goals and my employees are happy, by default, our company is doing well.
Now, many people are critical of direct mail because it is so expensive to send a letter. You've got the printing cost, you've got the creative cost, you've got the postage costs, and the price of postage is going up, 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 up. Mm-hmm. And very often, mailings lose money. Why do clients put up with that?
Because there really isn't any better way for, particularly for nonprofits, to raise money.
The more they lose, the better off they are? No, how do you explain?
Well, it is simple. You make an investment to build a client a list of supporters and donors. And you generally, for some organizations and at certain times, you're very lucky and you can build that list at break even. In general, it's a financial investment. But
basically, you're buying donors. Mm-hmm. In other words, you're searching for people who are sympathetic to your purposes.
Yes.
And it costs you money to find them.
Right.
But once you find them, the likelihood is that they will become repeat givers. So over time, the investment in the purchase of that name or the expenditure of funds to secure that name yields a net gain.
Absolutely, and we track very closely for our clients the cost to acquire a donor versus the lifetime value of that donor. So if the cost to acquire a donor is too high, then the program isn't working. And if the lifetime value of the donor is too low, then that program, which we call the house file, where we are resoliciting their donors for them, mailing them out newsletters and regular updates on what the organization is doing and asking for funds, if the lifetime value of a donor is not at the level it should be, it means that program has to be looked at and readjusted.
And how do you determine which topics will be covered in a mailing for an organization? How much of it is seat of the pants? How much of it is intuition? How much of it is, as the saying goes, flying by your gut? And how much of it is scientific? Is direct mail an art or a science?
It's a little of both.
Okay.
An organization may have 10 or 20 issues that they're working on. The art is finding the issue that is going to resonate with your target market. The science of it is you are constantly testing. You're testing different issues, you're testing different packages on those issues, and you're constantly evaluating the results of each segment of each mailing.
And all of it costs money. It takes time to do research. It takes time to write copy. What are the particular qualities you look for in hiring a copywriter? Does it have to be someone who is broadly knowledgeable in issues, or are there other characteristics?
Well, we do a lot of nonprofits that are political advocacy groups, and therefore I do look for copywriters who are well-versed on current events and conservative, because our clients are conservative. In addition, I like to find copywriters who do have a basic understanding of marketing. And a lot of people who come through my office interviewing have never read a book on advertising or marketing, and that's something we really... You
read those at Direct Mail and at William & Mary and at George Mason?
Well, no, I didn't read them at college. I took marketing classes, but no, when I started at the Viggory Company, one of the things you did, and most agencies don't continue this today, one of the things you did is you read books, and you read Claude Hopkins, and you read David Ogilvy, and one book after another.
David Ogilvy of Ogilvy Mather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you read one book after another, and that's something we still try to encourage our staff, and if not pressure our staff into doing, is becoming well educated in their craft.
Now, the media does its best, the liberal media, to discredit organizations that rely on direct mail, to say, well, only this percentage went for the actual work of the organization, et cetera, et cetera. And this creates questions in the minds of donors. Mm-hmm. How does a donor know that he's not being ripped off? How does he know that the organization is delivering on the commitments that it has made, on the promises that it's made, on the suggestions that it's put forward? How does the donor know that he can trust the entity or the person to whom he's sending the money?
Well, you really have to prove that to the donor in the mailings, in the newsletters, constantly reinforcing it. I look at it as a circle, and you have to close the circle. You send them a mailing and you ask them to sign a petition or answer a survey. You need to use the newsletters and use other mailings to go back and reinforce what you did with that petition, what you did with that survey. We also encourage clients to have advisory boards, utilize pub notes, names that the donor will recognize.
Isn't there a danger that if you have an advisory board, there could be one name on it which offends the donor, which causes the donor not to give a penny?
Absolutely, and I did a test with a client recently who had a very successful package. We tested the package with the advisory board on the letterhead. It did better without the advisory board, and I'm quite sure that's the reason.
You used an important word, reinforcement. And I know that Richard Viggory, who's been a friend of mine since the early 1960s, always advises that you'll do better in the mail if people are reinforced, if your message is reinforced by their hearing you on the radio, reading about you in the newspaper, seeing you on the internet, and having you discussed or appearing on the television screen.
Absolutely, and whether the client is a charity or whether they're a nonprofit that's doing political advocacy work, the implementation of the mission has to happen. And the more visible a client is, the more success they will have in their program.
Mm-hmm. And now, when you solicit donations, obviously you know how much people give. And there may be a $25 donor one time who will later give you $1,000. That can happen.
Yes.
I remember my organization had a $25 donor, Mary Kelly of Chicago, and when she died, in her will, she left us $25,000. So one never knows. Every donor is valuable. But there's a process called creaming, where you only mail to the people who have a history of giving $1,000, for example. Why do not organizations send to the cream names, thinking they'll get a bit? Why don't, if they can mail to a whole panoply of donors, why not just take the big donors and just mail to them?
Well, first of all, just because a donor has given you $10 or $25 doesn't mean the person doesn't have the capacity to donate more. Most large donors start out as small donors. They start out as a $10 donor. As they trust you, they become a $25 donor, a $50 donor, and work their way up the ladder. So that's ultimately the best strategy. Now, that being said, one of the things we do and are doing more and more of for our clients is, rather than having one-size-fits-all direct mail, we're really moving more.
So you have a better package for the bigger donor. We have to take a break, but let me just say that someone who's been very successful at mailing only to $100 plus donors is Morton Blackwell, who spent a lot of time working with Richard Viguerie. And by focusing on the $100 plus donor, he's getting a fabulous response. And he's able then to follow up with personal contact, getting people to make incredibly large donations. And he has an annual budget now of about $17 million because of this high dollar strategy. You're going to learn some more about direct mail when we come back with Kathleen Patten, the head of American Target Advertising, right after these messages. Stay with us. There are many conservative organizations, but the Conservative Caucus is unique in that our standard for evaluating public policy is the Constitution of the United States. Our goal is to advocate policies which conform to what the Constitution stipulates and to oppose those which undermine the Constitution. It's clear that the federal government has only those powers which are provided in the Constitution, which were initially delegated by the states to the federal government, or which were subsequently added by amendment. If we adhered to that principle, your taxes would be lower and your liberties would be more secure.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable. And our guest is Kathleen Patten, who is now the president and chief executive officer of American Target Advertising, a company founded by direct mail entrepreneur Richard Viguerie. Now, how did you get to be the president and CEO? You're so young. You're not a weather-beaten male. How did you get to be the president and CEO? What happened to Richard Viguerie? Why isn't he the president and CEO?
Oh, he's still there every day, believe me.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Looking over your shoulder.
He puts in long days. But he spends his time mainly on the clients and the accounts, and he spends a lot of time reading copy and looking at mailing results and investing his time in what really makes the program successful, the fun part of it.
So he really can't retire?
I'd say no.
And he tries to give the impression that he's detached.
Well, he's, you know, I do the day-to-day administrative, and he does spend plenty of time on his own different political activities and writing his books and things like that. But he is very involved in the clients' accounts and their mailing programs.
Well, be immodest and tell us about the progression of your career. How did you go from being a recent college and graduate school alumna to being the head of one of the most highly regarded direct mail companies in America? What was the progression?
Well, it's been 20 years of working for the Vigri Company and Stone and Associates, and I spent 10 years at a nonprofit, which I think has given me a different perspective.
So you were on the inside as well as the outside.
And I think it gave me a very different perspective than a lot of...
And you doubled their membership, as I recall.
Yes, I did. And we did. We had some really successful mailing programs and some very successful grassroots and legislative campaigns.
And one of your buddies was Art Linkletter,
yes,
who was the public image of United Seniors. Mm-hmm. He's still around. He's in his 90s.
He is, and he is just a wonderful man. It's a joy to be around him.
Do you still see him or hear from him?
I haven't talked to him recently, but it's probably been a year or two.
A charming man who's had some bumps along the road in his life. He had
Absolutely.
a daughter who committed suicide. He recovered from that. And he was most famous for his television program, Kids Say the Darndest Things. A wonderful man. So anyway, you worked with the United Seniors, then what?
I was there 10 years. I did my master's degree there at night and left there 4 years ago and went back to Richard's company, which is American.
Did he recruit you or did you apply?
He recruited me. And I went back there and have, you know, I kind of came to work on one account or two accounts, and then I did more and more and more. And
well, he obviously has a very high regard for you.
As I do for him.
How many accounts are there at American Target Advertising?
Oh, probably 15, I'd say.
And in the interest of full disclosure, the Conservative Caucus, sponsoring this broadcast, is one of the Vigri Company's, American Target Advertising's accounts. And we're very glad that you're working for us. You're doing a great job, and I think it's profitable for our donors and for your organization.
Absolutely.
How many people work on the staff handling those 15 accounts?
Probably about 30. Yeah, I'd say about 30.
So it's a good-sized crew.
It is.
And the company in years gone by had more troubles than now. And I say this as a friend of Richard Vigri, but Richard would always say that the key to success in football and in direct mail is 3 yards and a cloud of dust. But that's not the way he did it. He always threw the long ball. And sometimes he threw for interceptions. And that led to challenges and difficulties. Is he now more focused on 3 yards and a cloud of dust? Limited gains is what we're saying.
Maybe somewhat so. I think that being an entrepreneur and starting his own business, to be successful at that, you naturally are going to be a risk taker.
Absolutely.
I would say I'm slightly less so than him. I'm still willing to take a risk, obviously, but I probably am a little less so than him, and so we'd probably do a very good job of balancing each other out. Now,
most direct mail donors are at least 55 years of age. Is that a fair statement?
I'd say most are probably 65.
65 and above. I get a lot of mail. I try to answer each letter personally, and I'm amazed at how many people in their 90s, some of them more than 100 years old, drop me a note and have an idea or a question, and I try to get back to them. And I guess that's because when people are younger, they're paying their mortgages, they're paying for their kids' education, they're paying for that second car. What's your theory about why people don't really start giving until they're 60?
Well, I think that's very true. I think it is partly lifestyle. I also think it is partly disposable income. So part of it is simply a factor of time. A younger person today is most likely going to open their mail standing over the trash can. A person who's 65 or 75 or likely even 55 is going to have time to sit down on the sofa and open up their mail and read their letters.
Well, Richard Viguerie was successful in training a whole generation of direct mail entrepreneurs and copywriters and whatever. And one of the consequences of that fact is there's so much competition. Once someone is a donor, the name appears on a list, and then it's rented out to other organizations. So someone who's a generous donor can get 10 direct mail pieces a day. How do people survive? How does ATA survive with that much competition?
Well, I would say it's a high-quality product. We really work hard at our copy to make sure the letters are relevant to the donor, not just relevant to the people who are writing it and designing it. We want it to resonate with them. We also work a lot on the graphics of our packages, and a lot of agencies probably don't put the time in each mailing that we do.
What are the big issues? Now, as I look back, some things about which I care deeply don't resonate with our donors. From the very beginning, the Conservative Caucus was opposed to NAFTA. We thought it was unconstitutional. We thought it was bad for America, bad for American industry, bad for American workers, but our donors didn't agree with me. And I think one of the problems is that we have as conservatives is that liberals can tell their story overnight on television, on the front page of the newspaper, and this was even more true before the days of talk radio and cable TV, whereas we have to beat the tom-toms for years before an issue resonates with our people. Now, one of the issues that resonated big time when we were getting started was the surrender of the Panama Canal. And my opinion, from a cursory look at things happening recently, is that no issue since then has resonated as much, has struck a chord as much as that one did, as now the opposition to George Bush's scheme to merge the United States into a North American Union with Canada and Mexico. I mean, people are contacting us and saying, why aren't you doing something on this? And of course, the Conservative Caucus has started a coalition to block the North American Union. There are other issues that have done well, the whole issues that appeal to the elderly, no Social Security benefits for illegal aliens who return to Mexico, preserving the integrity of the Social Security Trust Fund, immigration issues generally, concern about the judiciary, the Constitution Restoration Act. What is your sense in 10 seconds? Give me the three top issues in your view.
Immigration. From the donor's perspective, Social Security will always be a top issue, even though it's not in the newspaper every day. Sovereignty.
The independence of the United States. Folks, stay with us, and when we come back, Kathleen Patten is going to be available to tell you how you can learn more about direct mail. Maybe you want to be in this business. Stay with us. There are many conservative organizations, but the Conservative Caucus is unique in that our standard for evaluating public policy is the Constitution of the United States. Our goal is to advocate policies which conform to what the Constitution stipulates and to oppose those which undermine the Constitution. It's clear that the federal government has only those powers which are provided in the Constitution, which were initially delegated by the states to the federal government or which were subsequently added by amendment. If we adhered to that principle, your taxes would be lower and your liberties would be more secure.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable. If you're interested in the kinds of issues and topics we cover on Conservative Roundtable, I hope you'll check out our website, www.conservativeusa.org, or fax us a question or a comment at 703-281-4108. On the other hand, you may choose to use snail mail and drop us a note at 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia, 22180. Now, we had a very interesting guest today, and we talked about direct mail, which is a major source of revenue for conservative organizations, and it's also a major way of informing conservative activists and supporters around the country about issues which are really not covered in detail even on cable TV or on the evening news or in the morning newspapers or in many supposedly conservative publications. Now, if people want to learn more about direct mail and about your company, American Target Advertising, how do they contact you?
Well, we're located in Manassas, Virginia, and our phone number is 703-392-7676.
Do you have an email number?
My email address is kpatten, that's Patten, at americantarget.com.
Now, we can use this time any way you like. We have about a minute left. If someone watching this program said, I really like this stuff, this sounds interesting, what advice would you give to a college student or a high school student about how to become involved in the direct mail business? And we only have 30 seconds, so make it snappy.
Well, I would say get an internship at a direct marketing agency or look for your local direct marketing association chapter. And they have usually educational institutes, courses, and libraries of books.
Kathleen Patten, thanks for your very informative comments. Thank you for taking the time to join us on Conservative Roundtable, and I hope that American Target Advertising continues to be successful, because since we're one of your clients, your success is our success. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Howard.
And thank you for watching Conservative Roundtable. See you next time.